we'll get you some food. And then he starts trying to attack Eben. It's almost like he can't even control himself, too. It wasn't like at first you could tell he was kind of apprehensive about it, and then it was just instinct took over, you know?
Yeah.
So during this whole thing, like, this guy gets tangled up in these kids' swings, and Eben beheads them. And that's the end of this guy. So what Eben finds out here is that you can kill these fuckers by beheading them. Kind of true to some old vampire legend, right?
Yeah, that's one of the ways, as long as the head is completely severed from the body. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, very with a stake through the heart type thing. But, you know, there's no stakes in this shit. So at this point, when the blizzard hits, Eben actually, and some of the others, they use the whiteout conditions that are going on because it's so impossible to see. Again, think Thing whenever they're on the road, you know, they're on the line and they're trying to, you know, get from place to place, and nobody can see. It's the same type of deal here, but the point of this is so the vampires don't see them. So, I mean, you know, vampires are pretty much superhuman, but they can't get through this blizzard and see who's moving where any better than anybody else, which makes sense. So they go to the general store, and I think this scene's kind of corny. I don't know about you, Blake. I think it's a little out there. You got this young girl vampire that attacks them, and he wounds one of them, or she wounds one of them. The whole thing with, I'm done playing, I don't know. I think it was meant to be creepy. It didn't work for me. What about you?
No, I mean, there are things that worked about this movie and things that didn't. It's kind of a fair mix, you know, of each. But no, that part didn't really, you know, sit with me. It didn't, you know, it didn't elicit the reaction from me that I think they were trying to elicit from people that watched it.
Yeah, I'm sure it scared people that are, like, scared of, like, I don't know, kids that are creepy. You know what I mean? In some of those movies, like Gage from Pet Sematary, and people like that, they just get creeped out by that type of thing. Vic, what about you? Did you think the little girl was a little bit goofy? I thought it was just corny for the type of movie we were watching.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was what it was. It wasn't creepy to me or either one of these. So it was definitely corny and cheesy.
Yeah, it just didn't work for me. And they never explained who the girl was. It's like, oh, I don't know who she is. And they're just like, well, moving on. You know, they actually killed this young girl, too. Well, she was already dead, but you get my point. They take her head off, and they don't show it. You notice they didn't show the old people get killed, and they don't show the little girl get killed. It's sad. You know, if it was Blob from the 80s or Halloween 3, they would have shown that shit.
Trying to retain that rating, man, that below X rating. You know the MPAA has it out for our shit. You know that.
You know, they allowed a whole lot of red stuff, didn't they?
Well, it just depends. Like in the old Friday the 13th movies, like specifically the third and fourth, you could show the knife going in.
Yep.
And you could show the blood splash, but you couldn't show the knife exiting, or vice versa. You couldn't show the knife going in, or you could show the knife going out but not going in, and then still show blood. They're weird. They're fucking picky. You know?
It's like if you don't like it, don't fucking watch it. So I mean, it's dumb. We've been over this before, but you know. Anyway, so that part didn't work for any of us, I suppose. I'm glad I'm not the only one, because I just thought it was goofy. And I mean, this was a serious movie for the most part. And, you know, you throw in a scene like that, and it feels like a video game. I know it was a comic, and maybe it was in the comics, but it just, again, it took me out of the movie a little bit. So anyway, what happens from here after they kill this girl and get away? The whiteout conditions end. So now the town is... his visibility's back, and it's like, shit, we can't even get back to the abandoned house now because the vampires are going to see us. So Eben decides everyone should go to the station house, and he's going to provide a diversion by running to his grandmother's house where she grew the marijuana. But that means she has ultraviolet lighting system, and if it works, you know, if it's like sunlight, then it could hurt them or kill them even. You know, nobody's sure if this is going to work. I like when earlier in the movie, the big bearded guy says, just because something killed Bela Lugosi in the movies doesn't mean it's going to work on them. Anytime you mention Bela Lugosi, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Because he was the man. So anyway, Eben makes it to the house. He turns on the generator, and he turns the light on the vampires who followed him there. And the one I was talking about earlier, the long black-haired one that I said was obviously didn't look human, it burns the shit out of her. And, like, Marlowe comes over and kind of gives her a look like, what the hell? And then he takes her out. It looked like he fed on her, too, didn't it? Because he bit her. I mean, that's how he killed her, it looked like. It's not like he just cut her head off. Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah, it did.
I mean, I don't know if he drank her blood, but he took her out that way. I guess he just liked biting people. So Evan gets out of the house, but the vampires are in pursuit. And Bo, this is, again, the bearded guy from earlier. This time it's his turn to, come to the rescue. And he kills a bunch of the vampires with this plow he's driving. It's his plow. He crashes into a hotel. And then when the vampires kind of descend upon him, he ignites a box of dynamite, hoping to, incinerate all of them. But it's unsuccessful. But it does give Eben the time to make it to the station house. And this part's pretty sweet. Like, whenever Bo is laying there on the ground and Marlowe comes over to him, and he's like, "You people are a plague," and he puts his foot on him and just crunches his head. It's fucking brutal. That was some Michael Myers from Halloween 2 stuff right there. Halloween Remake 2. Right, Vic?
Yeah. What?
Insight is always appreciated, buddy.
Yeah, fuck you.
Damn.
Anyway, Evan's given time to make it to the station house. They're the wounded other member of his party who's like an Eskimo or something. He actually turns into a vampire. But this guy's kind of got a shred of his humanity left, and he asks Eben to behead him because he doesn't want to live forever. His family's actually dead. So, see, to me, I think this scene's pretty powerful in its own way, where this guy's, telling him that his family's dead, he can't live forever, because he wants to see them again. And then what I think's effective, while it would be cool to see him kill him, I think it actually was more effective for him to go to the other room and you just hear it and the people's reactions,
Yeah. It was powerful, though, the way it was done. I really did like that. The sense of desperation and, being forced into doing something you don't want to do just to save your own ass,
Yep, absolutely. It was, I just thought a good scene overall where, what's going. It's like when somebody puts a dog out of its misery. It's sad, but it's more messed up that you could see these people's reactions to the sound of it, like Fight Club. Blake, whenever Angel Face is getting the shit beat out of him.
Yeah.
So anyway, 2 more weeks pass, and I have a hard time keeping track of the time because I kind of half-ass watch this movie, even though I'm doing it 8 times. Like, I'm working while I'm doing it, so a lot of the subtitles and stuff like that I wasn't catching. But anyway, 2 more weeks pass, and Stella and Eben, they see somebody signaling from across the street, and it's Billy Kitka, who's Eben's deputy. And this part's messed up too. I feel like, there's some messed up parts in this movie, but Eben and Stella, they make it over to Billy's house, and when the vampires attacked, he actually killed his own wife and daughters. We're talking about The Mist. You know what I'm talking about? This was like this guy did a mercy killing of his wife and daughters. Then he's going to kill himself, but the gun jammed before he could commit suicide. And like you could just see Eben just lose his shit over it. Like he wants to kill this guy, but at the same time he can't bring himself to do it. But at the same time, you kind of understand where the guy's coming from. It's really just a weird thing, but it's like, again, another powerful thing. I thought if you're not paying enough attention, you don't know as much what's going on. But if you pay enough of attention, you can kind of get the emotion involved in that. I don't get so deep into movies too often, but I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, so Stella and Eben, they take this guy back to the station house, and, this is where they learn that the others have made it to the Utilidor, which is a power station that controls the oil pipeline, and the only structure that still has power in the whole town. So Eben, Stella, and Billy, they begin to sneak towards the Utilidor, but Stella stops to rescue a young girl who's being stalked by a vampire. I have no idea who this girl is. I'm glad that we weren't supposed to know because I never noticed her before. And Meanwhile, Eben and Billy, they try to distract the vampire while Stella gets the girl to safety, but instead Billy and Eben are actually separated. And they both eventually make it to the utilidor, but a vampire follows Billy. And is it the bald one this time? The bald vampire that actually follows him, or is it not? I don't know. Fuck it. It's a vampire, regardless. It's not Marlowe. Anyway, so Eben's, happy to see the rest of the survivors have made it alive, but the vampire attacks Billy, ripping into his neck and cutting off his hand that gets stuck in this fucking grinder. That was brutal, wasn't it? This movie was violent as hell, but I think that was probably the most violent part of the whole movie.
It was. It was very reminiscent of Saw or ABC's of Death, Taste of Death, something like that. Yeah.
Do you remember that part, Vic, where the dude gets his hand ground off? That was gross.
Gross, awesome, it's all the same, I guess.
It is all the same. You're right. I can't disagree. But yeah, like I said, violent movie. A lot of blood in this. A lot of fucking nastiness. Like I said, when the vampire attacks Eben, Billy knocks into the gears of the utilidor's pump, which actually disintegrates the vampire. It goes through this grinder, and it again brutal. And then Eben realizes that Billy's about to turn into a vampire, so Eben cuts his head off. See, this was practical, Blake. This part where his head falls to the side, that was pretty practical. Most of it was CGI, I feel like, but this one was a pretty good example of practical effects. Am I wrong?
No, that was practical. It was like I said, there were other parts in the film where it was a fair mix. I kind of have this proclivity, I guess, against too much CGI.
Yeah. And, in 2007, everybody was using CGI, so I'm glad we got any kind of practical effects, to be honest with you, because everybody was going heavy on CGI about 10 years ago. Now we're getting a kind of a turn back to practical, or as much as possible. But, back then, I'm just glad we got a little bit of that. Even the fire and the snow falling, you could tell was CGI, when you watch the movie on a decent TV. So, anyway, sun's due to rise in a few hours, finally, and the vampires say, fuck it, you know what? We can't get to these people. We don't know where they are. They're going to hide. We're just going to burn this bitch to the ground. Plus, they got to cover their tracks, too, because they don't want people knowing about the existence of vampires. So Stella radios to Eben that she and the young girl are hiding under an abandoned truck. And, that you've got this fire that's quickly coming towards them. And Eben, I thought this was cool realization for him. Like, he realizes, he can't do anything to these vampires as a human. It doesn't work. And you can't behead all of them. So he injects himself with AIDS from Billy's infected blood, or whatever you want to call it, the vampire sickness, virus, whatever you want to call it. Something about that. That takes some balls to do. Not just turning yourself into a vampire, but actually shooting up with somebody else's blood. Yuck.
Yeah.
I guess crackheads kind of do it, though, don't they, Vic?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yep. I'm just saying. Fucking heroin addicts. So anyway, he injects himself with that blood so he can fight them as a vampire, and he turns, and the first thing he says whenever he, is a vampire is he says, I can smell your blood. And everybody's like freaked out around him, and like he gets up and he just goes after the vampires. And this is like he comes straight to Marlowe, and him and Marlowe start having a fight. And Marlowe's kicking the shit out of Eben, isn't he? He is whooping Eben's ass. Like Eben starts to fight, and Marlowe just keeps whipping his ass at every corner. Then Marlowe goes flying into him, and this part's a little goofy, I thought. Eben puts his hand right through. It's cool, but it's kind of goofy, too. Again, took you out of the movie. Puts his hand right through his throat to the back of his head. And Marlowe's dead. Didn't you guys think that was a little goofy? I don't know. Again, it was a little too... Again, this was a mix of seriousness and a little bit of comic book to where it was like, it takes you... Like, don't get me wrong, if this was just balls to the wall comic book stuff all the way through, I would have been okay with that. And I would have been okay with it being serious all the way through. I just don't think mixing them was the right decision. But that's me.
Well, it kind of is like a staple of Dark Horse comics and stuff that they have. There is usually a fair mix of some sort of humor and then some sort of horror too. But I think the point that they in using that in the film was to show that he had finally reached that plateau of having, absolute vampire